Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm in Arizona and so excited that this is a sponsorship video, but I know these two gentlemen really well and what they're doing in Arizona, Prescott, is amazing. And actually it's Prescott.
Prescott.
That's exactly. Right. So before we get going, I just want to introduce them. One is Dr. Jeffrey Hansen and then Tim Hayden, the founder of Holdfast and also AnchorPoint. Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you for having us, Andy.
That's awesome. Thank you for hosting and just a wonderful day together to get to know you and what you're doing here and all the great things you're doing. So Tim, why Holdfast? Why AnchorPoint here in Prescott?
That's a great question, Andy. And it's nothing I ever thought I would do or planned on, but God had a different plan for me than what I thought. It kind of goes back to meeting Brendan McDonough in the early days. And, he, being the lone survivor of the Granite Mountain Hotshots, dealt with his own struggles and tragedy, kind of with addiction before the Hotshot crew, and then obviously after as well with survivor's guilt and a number of things. And through his own journey, decided he wanted to help other people and focus on that and start a treatment facility. And we had a mutual friend, Pastor Bob, at our local Heights church that Brendan had reached out to and said, "Hey, I have this call from God. I have this ministry I want to start to help people in recovery." And he's like, "But I have no idea what to do from a business perspective. Do you know anybody that can help me out?" And so Pastor Bob, he said, "Yeah, I know Tim. He's a business guy. I'm sure he'd be happy to help you." And so I met Brendan, and which was really cool, and to hear his story, not only from the movie and the book, but to hear it personally. And I was just immediately drawn to the guy, and his heart to serve other people is really powerful. And so I learned about this thing that was recovery, right? And it was just super cool to hear about this opportunity that there's these guys that are in their hardest times that are just grasping at straws for help, and to be able to help them in their biggest time of need. And just hearing about these guys with this massive hole in their heart, they're just seeking God, and some of them don't even know it, right? And when I found out that, Brendan was putting this together, I was like, I'm in. Like, how do I get involved? I want to help. This is just an amazing opportunity.
That's awesome. And I think it's so cool that Brendan's a firefighter. He deals with firefighting emergencies and crises. And so what you're doing here at Holdfast and also AnchorPoint is the firefighter for the soul. Yeah. You are putting out crises. You are putting out fires that are literally life or death situations. And I think that's why you brought Dr. Jeffrey Hansen in to help you with this, right? With the firefighting for the soul.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it was through our journey, it hasn't been the easiest journey over the last 7 years since we started. And it's been a roller coaster up and down. And, but God was working through the whole thing. And we got so many God stories where he's shown up, and Dr. Jeff was part of that. A few years back, we were really looking for a strong clinical director. And we were really looking, we've always been striving for excellence, but we're at that, out of that new business danger zone where you're ready to really up-level things. And so we were on this search for a clinical director that could take us to the next level. And, in the treatment industry, if you look at the research, a lot of the data says that, in general, treatment centers haven't gotten significantly better over time. And we're not okay with that, right? And so we wanted to take a different approach clinically and culturally, too, within the organization. And so we went out looking for an excellent clinical director. And, Prescott is a smaller town, and there's a small talent pool here. And so we were kind of reaching out, looking broader. And I got a random call from a friend, someone that actually went to high school with in Ohio, that had met this Dr. Hansen guy at a local event. And they were looking for some therapy resources for their nonprofit. And she reached out to me and said, "Hey, is there somebody you could use?" that we could maybe share a resource. And so I said, yeah, absolutely, let's talk. And talked to Dr. Jeff. And the first time we called him, Jeff, what'd you say?
Well, he called me out. I get this random call. I'm in the hospital. And you introduced yourself and said, we're Holdfast. And well, we knew the story. My wife loves the story of Brendan McDonough. So she followed that. We've seen the movies, read the book. But my answer was no. Yep. I had other things in mind. And so I said no. And then God maybe had other plans, right? So I said, to tell you what, I'm building a house because we had planned to move down here all along. And so I said, well, how about if we do lunch? So we met. And it was kind of one of those deals, love at first sight. And Brendan, the prophet Brendan, said, I think this is going to work out. So that was, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
And here we are.
A
lot of ups and downs through negotiating, getting down here and everything, but it's in. And I was working still at the hospital doing telemedicine up to Madigan for about a year plus, and then kind of doing clinical directing kind of on the side. And then now I'm more full-time, so it's like been a great journey. So happy to be here.
Yeah, and it's pretty amazing. Even at, when we first met Dr. Jeff, a big draw was his expertise in trauma and all of his years of experience in trauma. And that's a direction we've been moving over the years, is just more trauma focused. And he has written several books and has a great career record. But we had no idea of what we were actually getting. Like, we knew he was good, but the impact he's made on our organization and with our clients is just off the charts, and has completely transformed our therapeutic model and improved our client success rate. And it's just been. He's really helped transform our organization. It's awesome.
I remember that too, Jeff, because Dr. Hansen and I are good friends, and we speak every day together on the phone. And I remember when you said, no, I'm not taking that job. And then a few weeks later, hey, I'm taking that job. It totally confused me. Like,
Right.
What are you doing? You're supposed to be retiring because you're just retired from
Madigan, yeah. And in fact, my friends up there will say, Jeff, how's that retirement working out? So I'm just thrilled to be here. And it's like, really, this may sound a little maybe unusual, but like coming to work's fun. It's a pleasure. And seeing what the mission is of Holdfast and soon to be AnchorPoint, where we literally are saving lives. And so, you're military, and being military setting, you have to be careful about your faith. People learn about your faith, but you have to be very careful. So to be able to be down here and to be able to talk openly about Christ and the transformational aspect of what faith does in healing trauma addiction is just amazing.
Yeah, speak on that topic a little bit, because there's actual research to show that faith, I mean, we're all Christians, but not particularly Christianity, but faith plays an important role in recovery and mental health.
Absolutely. Lisa Miller's work. Lisa Miller is actually a Jewish researcher, clinical psychologist like myself, and she's researched this area. Just having faith is just immensely neuroprotective. And you're 4 times less likely to commit suicide, 4 times less likely to have major depression. And just the neurogenesis of the brain enhances when you have faith. So we know that faith is one aspect of getting through the pain of trauma. We also know that trauma drives addiction. So if you have a faith aspect in that therapy, you have huge gains, because trauma always produces a negative narrative about the self. And so hence, our NeuroFaith model, which we'll talk about at some point later down the...
Let's talk about it now. So in addition to the faith aspect, what other concentrations at this facility makes you unique in your treatment, and how has that made it more successful?
I think it's the integration of neuroscience with faith. And so when I got here, I go, I need to pull together my knowledge of trauma and pull together in the area of addiction per se. You and I have a long history in working with process addiction. We co-wrote a book together. And this was a switch for me, so I had to learn a lot about substance addiction. And as I was doing that, I go, well, I need to really figure out what is going to be a really integrative approach to bringing in our faith with what we do in our therapy. And having a neuroscience background, that was the easy part. But thinking through, what are these specific transformational therapies along with incremental therapies that make it work? So kind of started writing a book, a manuscript, and then you joined as a co-author. And also Earl Heverly, who was our spiritual representative, Pastor Earl Heverly. And so we put together a book, which we just published, maybe 5 months ago?
Yep.
Yeah, and I'll put it on the screen for
Yeah,
our
yeah.
viewers.
And so that book has done really, really well, but it's basically our approach to how we treat trauma addiction. And we are of the mindset, and most of traumatologists are, and addictionologists, Gabor Mate being one, is that addiction doesn't happen in a vacuum. And usually you have pre-existing trauma. And so we have two types of traumas that we think about. So we have little tree trauma, which is basically when you're growing up, ongoing traumas that build up, developmental trauma is also called. And then we also have big T trauma, which is like military trauma, whatnot. But the developmental trauma starts to take a toll. It builds up, and when you have that trauma build up, it affects how the autonomic nervous system wires in. And we have a tendency to go activation, the HP activation, or the dorsal vagal shutdown. And I think we'll have a chart that we can show later on that. But that trauma causes that system to develop differently. And so we now have the neuroscience of understanding that trauma affects the way we go to defense. And so a child having too much trauma along the way up will tend to go into defense, either activating up or shutting down. And we need to be in that green spot, the ventral vagus green spot, to be healthy. And so when that goes into adulthood, and even in adolescence, people will tend to go to addiction to help themselves feel better, because it's a terrible way to feel.
So let me explain a little bit more about the neuroscience behind this. So basically, we use this in a lot of mental health clinics and also in the military to basically look for people who are in a vigilant, hypervigilant state. And so imagine this to be like a thermometer, right? So you want to be in green and blue. Orange is getting into danger zone, fight or flight. Red is danger. And then basically a deep red is like catastrophic. But I want to mention that the way God designed us is that it's a spectrum. So there are points when you want to be on this spectrum where you're in an extreme fight or flight. And I'll give you an example. Burning building, you got to rescue a baby, rescue a patient. You got to be up here in this hyper activated state.
Right.
So your brain is the hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis. It also has the hypothalamus pituitary thyroid axis and also the gonadal axis. So that secretes testosterone.
Right.
Adrenals is like cortisol, adrenaline going. If you're sleepy and not active,
Right.
you're not going to be able to save the baby in the burning building. So men of action, women of action, go-getters, what I've seen can rev up and rev down.
Yes.
And that's the problem.
Yeah.
So if you're working in a state where you're revved up all the time, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, thyroid axis, gonadal axis burns out.
Yes.
Because there's a negative feedback loop.
Yes.
So testosterone, thyroid hormones, adrenaline, cortisol feed back on the hypothalamus, and it literally turns it down. So the thermostat gets turned off, basically. So you need to do things greater, more intense.
Yes.
You got to up the ante. You got to escalate the stimulation.
Yeah.
So $10,000 of earnings is not enough. So you go for the $50,000 bet and then the $100,000 and then the $1 million,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Or one hit is not enough. So you now escalate from marijuana to heroin to fentanyl. What you want to do is use healthy tools
Exactly.
to get back down to a hypothalamus pituitary adrenal thyroid gonad state that literally is in the calm, alert, and active.
The other thing that trauma does is it creates a negative narrative. And that negative narrative is generally around, and I'm kind of citing Tim Fletcher's work, a negative core belief that I'm not lovable, I'm not valuable, and I don't matter. And you think about it, when you have those core beliefs driving the bus, you start to see the world differently. You see yourself differently, you see others differently, and it taints literally every interaction. And so we find that in putting our book together, we have to help people understand what has happened to them autonomically, and then we have to help them understand the negative core beliefs. So we hit it from multiple levels, right? We have polyvagal informed therapy, IFS, heart math neurocardiology, and then we do just a lot of healing work through faith.
The concept of faith has come up quite a bit, and I know that's ingrained in the name of your organization, Holdfast. Can you talk about how you came up with that name?
Yeah. Ultimately, it's holding fast to Christ, right? And through, when you think of like the old sailor term of holding fast, right? Weathering the storm, holding on to that stronghold, which is Christ. That's really where the Holdfast name came from. And now with AnchorPoint coming on board, it's like Christ is that anchor, right? And just in kind of the treatment phases, right? They're coming into AnchorPoint first, and that's where we want them to get grounded and anchored physically, mentally, spiritually here, and then moving into the outpatient model where it's holding fast. Okay, now that I'm anchored, I'm going to hold fast for the long term and hold fast to Christ.
That is awesome. So those two names are intertwined.
They absolutely
with
are.
Christ being the center.
Very purposeful.
Why you want to be part of this organization?
Yeah, I'll go first. And I talked a little bit about kind of the origin of how Brendan and I met. But from a testimony perspective, a big part of that makes this business relatable to me is after college, I went into tech sales and had a really good career there, worked my tail off, found a lot of validation in working in that industry. And it was really financially rewarding. Career-wise, it was super rewarding. I was getting promotions every couple of years and just on that total adrenaline, dopamine rush of kind of that performance-driven environment. And as I climbed the ladder, I was traveling all over the country, managing teams and working myself into the ground. And at the same time, juggling, being a father of three of my own. I had young children at the time. And trying to manage, a marriage, be the best dad I could be the best employee I could be. We were fostering a couple of kids at the time and just doing the whole juggling act, right? And I personally, after doing that for about a decade, couldn't keep up. And so I turned to stimulants and went to doctor, was seeking prescriptions, got on prescription Adderall just to be a high performer, right? And to function. And that worked for a time, right? But then you start to use more and more of it to keep up. And guess what? You don't need to sleep so much when you're taking Adderall, right? You can get more work done. And but then I wasn't sleeping good, right? And so then came in the alcohol, right? Then I'm using the alcohol to be able to sleep at night, and it just becomes a vicious cycle. And so I definitely have my personal experience abusing it, just trying to be that best version I thought I could be, but ultimately ended up running myself completely into the ground and just woke up one day and said, I can't keep doing this. And just completely, my body was shut down and couldn't do it anymore and said, I have to find a way out. And that was ultimately part of the reason that I was looking for some type of exit strategy from that corporate world. And when I find this and was so able to relate to these feelings of I'm not good enough and how do I keep up and how do I perform to please other people, and ended up stepping into Holdfast.
Well, I mean, everybody does have their backstory, right? You have your backstory, I have my backstory. You have your backstory, Dr. Doan. We all do. And it's really the authentic part of us, really. We can really get in touch with our backstory. In my case, I came from a family where had a father who was a veterinarian entrepreneur, very hard driver, a good man, but a very broken man. Because he had suffered loads of abuse by his father's hand, and he passed that on to us. More physical with my older brother, but he was emotionally abusive and just exposed us to a lot of anger because he was trying to, keep it down himself, and then he couldn't. So we were all tainted by that. And, one of our aspects of our treatment is IFS, internal family systems. And there's in that IFS model, right, we have a lot of pain. And it's a great theory because it basically gets into the psychological defenses that help us deal with what the body's absorbed from trauma. And that's that polyvagals, the body stuff. So in my case, and probably your case, Andy, we all became performers. And that's that management system. We have too much pain. It gets exiled down because as a young lad, you can't deal with it. So one way to be proactive about it is to perform. So I discovered performance at probably about age 7 and just had to get straight A's, top of the class. Sound familiar, gentlemen?
I didn't have that.
No, you didn't have that. Top guy in your sales, yeah. So we manage, and that's actually not a bad thing. In IFS, there's no bad parts. But we have the pain, we try to manage it. We proactively push it down. And when that doesn't work, then we'll tend to act it out, right? So that's the firefighters. And the firefighter defense just basically, instead of trying to tamp it down proactively, it reacts to try to put basically water on the fire. So those defenses worked out really quite well for me. I could manage, get a little wild on the weekends in high school. That served me well, got married, then kind of quieted down, performance. And then I was hit with a series of catastrophes. My wife had melanoma. She had recovered, though. And then our daughter was in and out of the hospital with what our doctor thought was lymphoma. And then the 06, 07, whenever that was, financial crisis. Well, my financial planner was telling me I was looking great, performing, and retirement looked great, everything looked great, and crashed. So I had like 3 or 4 mortgages. And so I told Leah I just need to go back to the manager, basically. I need to start performing. So I started working more. And then I had a client started threatening me, which is normally it would just bounce off, but I stopped sleeping. And I crashed. Really hard. And then I told my colleagues I couldn't get through an interview, which is unlike me. It was an interview that was a really easy thing for me. I'd done 1,000 of those types of interviews. I just couldn't think. I was in my limbic brain. And I said, take me to the hospital now. So I went to the hospital for 3 days, got sleeping, and the rest of the story was the climb out. And that's actually what got me into neuroscience, because I had enough money to really afford about any therapist I wanted. And these were good people, but they couldn't explain the physiological symptoms I was having. And that was terrifying. I go, wow, I'm in this alone. Nobody can really explain autonomically what's going on. And so I, then eventually got into polyvagal theory, which is in our book, and that helped me understand. So basically, part of my treatment model is what I had to learn to get whole. And the wonderful thing is, faith was a big part of my recovery. I had a pastor friend that I saw, and he was marvelous, Gary Thomas. He actually endorsed our book. And he helped me from a spiritual point of view love myself. And that's where I really got into the absolute love of God, that God loves you so much. And I really read Brendan Manning and Esther Laval and all those great old classics about just basically God's love. And through all of that, I learned to love myself, because you have to be able to come to the point where you're lovable in spite of the trauma you've had, which trauma always gives you a lie about yourself. And so it's really neat now to be able to do that here at Holdfast, bring those therapies together that I learned to help save my life. And I have a kind of an adage I go by. God will let no pain go unused if you let it. So all the things we have, we think we're just, how's God going to use this? God, he's a weaver. He's a tapestry. Puts the tapestry together. And I'm 70 now, so you look back on it and you go, well, wow, how'd I get here? And then you see all those things you thought were the end of the world for you. And in my case, it almost was. He takes it and he saves it. He doesn't waste anything. But you have to be willing to allow it, right?
Man, thanks for being transparent. I think that's going to be a blessing to a lot of people. Mm-hmm. Very few people can be transparent these days. And so that's why we're going to also bring on DJ next, and we're going to...
He has a story. DJ has a story.
Yeah, he went through your program, and he's very enthusiastic to share his testimony and his experience, and also a retired firefighter. So it's just part of your program. You just serve those who serve others. I just love it.
Mm-hmm. Now, another thing we do in our treatment, too, is we have thought long and hard about how we're going to make our groups rock. And we bring polyvagal heart math neurocardiology. It's basically heart math neurocardiology. It's basically a great way of helping the autonomic nervous system find a safe spot, because the heart, right? God mentions the heart, about 800-900 times? Mm-hmm. So God designed us to be in our hearts. And actually, there's like 40,000 sensory neurons in the heart. Isn't that cool?
That's
And they
cool.
form little neural networks, not quite like the brain, but a little bit. You get the wisdom, you get actually there's a memory to the heart. So we use that too. So we use those therapies in individual. Then we also have a lot of groups. What 6 hours of groups, DJ? 6 hours every day. So we have a lot of groups, and in the groups, we realized that in many centers the groups are not that effective, and I think even ours weren't that effective. And we started thinking about how we're going to make them really rock. So I went to a training, about a year and a half ago, maybe, and I was introduced to this thing called sociometrics. And the name intrigued me, so I went and studied. It's actually Tyann Dayton's work, borrowed off of Moreno, J.R. Moreno's. And that's a spinoff of psychodrama, specifically for trauma and addiction. So I did 1 day of that training. I had to leave early the next day, so I didn't get the second day. I got back and I started thinking about it. And God just wouldn't let me let that one go. So I started studying on it and doing some of my own personal training. So we've been bringing sociometrics in, which is basically, to get through trauma, you have to have an experience. And it's basically an experiential way and a well thought out. There's 4 basic tenets of it I won't go into here, but it rocks, doesn't it, DJ? We just really love sociometrics. So we have all been training on this as a staff, and I believe that our groups are phenomenal now.
Yeah, and what's cool about that is it ties it right in with the culture of Holdfast. And so, we talk, it's definitely, it's an all men's program, right? So it's a manly program. We're big outdoors guys. Our clients, we do a lot of outdoor activities, kayaking, hiking, going up to the Grand Canyon, etc. We love all that stuff. And we go to the gym every day, all those things, right? We're all big on that. And but on the flip side, we talk a lot about love, right? And it's those groups and the therapeutic model that Jeff has built that can take these macho men on one hand, but also help them open up, their hearts in these groups. And you'll see these these big tough firefighters that aren't afraid to open up and share and pour their hearts out. And so we talk a ton about love at Holdfast, right? The love for each other, the brotherhood that we create. I'm blown away, and the clients do that a lot themselves, of creating this brotherhood where they're all helping each other out. They're cooking meals together, right? They're just truly doing life together while they're there, which is just as therapeutic as the therapy itself, right? It becomes this amazing culture where we're going to be tough, or we're going to be manly men, or we're going to be leaders, but we're also going to talk about love. We are going to talk about our feelings. We're going to talk about Christ's love for each other, and it's just this amazing dynamic. And we were trying to create it, and it's kind of taken off on its own, and it's
Well,
incredibly
you
powerful
see in groups is the amazing thing about groups, Tim, is that clients heal themselves. They take God's love and they do wonderful things. So a good therapist in a good meeting will give direction, you get out of the way. And let these amazing men just bring God's love in and bring the principles that we've been trying to teach them, but they make it work. And it's phenomenal to see. When you're in love, in the state of love, in life and in emotions, your heart settles into a nice sine wave, the heart rate variability. If we breathe in, our heart rate goes up. This is HeartMath stuff. DJ knows all about it, right? Your heart rate goes, when you breathe in, goes up. When you breathe out, parasympathetic goes down. And when you're in good emotion flow, everything in your body loves that. Your heart loves that. And it actually, those risings and fallings press to a nice sine wave. When you're in negative mood, you have the same amplitude, but they're not organized. And too much of that will help kill you, actually. And people who are in trauma, people who are in states of, like, I'm not lovable, I'm not worth, why not go to addiction? You're in such a painful state, you'll go to the addiction. So we don't judge addiction. Gabamate teaches us, you don't ask why the addiction, you ask why the pain. So getting in these people being connected, touching, hugging, right? I never feel more connected with people than I'm with around people who struggle with addiction, because they know instinctively that they need love. And there's, like, how many times do you say, I love you at Holdfast in a day?
Yeah.
I mean, we're just like loving on each other.
Yep.
hugging on each other.
We have Brendan McDonough and Tim Hayden, the two founders of Holdfast and now AnchorPoint. Can you start with your story?
Yeah. No, thank you, Andy. We appreciate it. It's so, I don't know, for me, like just meeting people, right? Just having these interactions, and it's so mind-blowing how close we all are within this world of mental health, right? I don't think there's a person that hasn't been touched by it that hasn't had an impact, or a family member or a close friend. And so to find ourselves in this room, right, yourself and just highly accomplished and everything that you do within the military and outside of that, and Tim's background and my background, it's insane, you know, when I really start thinking about it. So just really honored to be here with you. But yeah, grew up like, unfortunately, most kids, you know, single parent. You know, my mom struggled with mental health, addiction issues, so I was bouncing back with grandparents and just kind of lost in life growing up. Started using, you know, drugs and alcohol pretty young, about 12. And, you know, looking back on it, it was obviously a coping skill, right? Something to numb. But when you're that young, you find reasons and excuses. And so just kind of navigated through high school, really didn't pay attention to much, and ended up having a kid at a young age, my daughter. You know, I was 19 and, you know, got in some legal trouble and was somehow hired on a hotshot crew that like radically transformed my life, going from, you know, addict felon to what people in the community would say hero and, you know, community member. And it really changed me for the good, right? I had so many leaders, and then suffering this tragedy, you know, that the world's seen June 30th, 2013, and experiencing PTSD and back into addiction. And it's like, I've been fortunate enough, you know, some people may not look at that I've lived like many lives, you know, from my childhood to middle adulthood to, you know, every few years for me is like a decade or two for some of experience. And so I'm really grateful for that. I get to pass it on, right? I get to give what's been given to me. And that's led to Holdfast Recovery and meeting Tim and AnchorPoint and going back in the fire service. But, you know, to take a step back just to Holdfast, it was out of resentment that it was started. You know, I was so frustrated with what was happening in the world of sobriety. And I felt like anyone else, you know, I was able to complain about it, but I wasn't willing to take part in a solution. And so I was spending time in prayer, and I was in between finishing a book and the movie Only the Brave, and kind of asking God, like, hey, what do you have next for me? What is it that you want me to do? Because I know what happens when I live my will. And it just runs rampant. And it talks about it in the Bible and also the big book, you know, self-will run riot. And I really just wanted to do what God wanted me to do. And I felt a calling to somehow open a Christian treatment center. And I remember telling some people around me, hoping they'd be like, yeah, man, I don't think you're ready, or, you know, that's kind of out of your wheelhouse. You know, mind you, I've got maybe 8 college credits and, you know, not much background in business or anything, just being a hotshot and addict alcoholic, right? And God just put people like Tim in my life that moved his life around in ways that, you know, aligned that there's no other option for me than to believe that this is divine intervention of what we're supposed to be doing today. And so it's beautiful, you know, you get to witness so much that only what I believe is a higher power, mine's God, Jesus Christ, that is orchestrated, because I'm constantly blown away at what doors he opens and how he makes connection and what healing is provided from people that, you know, have just met each other to lifelong, you know, relationships. So, you know, for a 1 second question, there's the, you know, 5-minute answer, right? Of like, where is life? What has happened? Awesome. And yeah, I still wake up and it's like almost like pinch me, I'm dreaming. You know, it is so, and sometimes I don't even try to wrap my head around it. I'm like, hey, let's just go with the day, because I'll spend all day trying to think of like, how did this happen? You know, and we've done it long enough that we start to get the messages from clients from years back, and it's like, hey, I've got 5-6 years sober, and I'm married, and I'm part of my kid's life, and I've been giving back, and I'm sponsoring people, and I'm volunteering in my church, and all these things, and it's like, holy cow, it's mind blowing. You don't think about that when you start something. You're just in the moment. You have that tunnel vision, and starting a business, it was survival mode, and so to be able to look back now to 30,000 foot, it's like, wow. And the cool part is, like, it's just begun. Like, it's just scratched the surface.
So share how things are just beginning.
Yeah, I think Tim can speak to it a lot better than I can, of like, how is it just beginning from what we thought it'd be, years ago.
Yeah, I think, we started, we really met maybe 7.5, 8 years ago. We've started Holdfast about 7 years ago, and didn't know each other extremely well, but kind of jumped in together and went through a ton of trials and tribulations, as I'm sure any small business owner can relate to. It's not easy, right? And it's wearing tons of hats and burning the candle at both ends. And but at the same time, like Brendan said, it's just tremendously rewarding, right? Like I try to go to we have an alumni group every Tuesday night with our clients. Alumni clients that come back, and it's the best part of my week to be able to sit in that alumni group, hear the success stories, the guys that have gone through the program, how their lives are being transformed, and it's what keeps us going. At least me personally, of like, yeah, the business side is hard, and every business has challenges and those kind of things, and we'll always face those. But man, those rewards to hear the lives that are transformed every Tuesday night, it makes my week. But that's what keeps us going and keeps us kind of growing and seeing the impact. And we're really big on healthy growth. Like I said earlier, we are in a pursuit of excellence. We want to make sure that everything we do is excellent, and we don't want to grow for the sake of growing. We want to make sure it's the right thing, and that we do it extremely well. And so we are continuing to grow. Obviously, we've opened AnchorPoint, our residential treatment center, which is a higher level of care than what Holdfast is. And what it allows us is really that with that higher level of care is more time with our clients. And in kind of the industry model of a 90 or 120 day treatment model, there's a lot of healing that has to be done. And we kind of talked earlier about just the time it takes your brain to heal, right? Let alone dealing with working through all your trauma with your therapist, and it takes time to heal. That's just the reality of it. And so the opening of AnchorPoint allows us that residential kind of that first phase where they can step in and just focus on that physical healing. Start to do some work, therapeutic work, but really letting that body heal, let them calm, and then start to do that work, and then transition into Holdfast for that longer term outpatient experience. And where it goes after that, I don't know. We'll see where God takes us. And we do have some other plans and to continue to expand, but we want to make sure that this is excellent first before we take that second and third step.
And to add on to that, one thing, that driving, motivating factor that Tim talks about is like purpose. And, for us, we're believers. And so you look at the Bible, and the greatest calling is to go out and make disciples. That's what Jesus calls us to do. And, you look at like John 15:13, no greater thing to do than to lay one's life down for another. And I feel like we try and repay that to those who have given so much, right? The first responders and the veterans that we work with. That's that pursuit of excellence for us. And so a life has infinite worth. And so how great is it for us to play a small role in someone regaining their life back? And so that value for us is so intrinsic and such a massive driving factor of like, why else not? Like, why else not do this? And that transformative piece that Dr. Jeffrey Hansen's brought to our program has been massive, and I think those are some of the key differentiators about Holdfast and AnchorPoint is, not only are we doing the really heavy clinical side in the moment, right? The talk therapy and different modalities, and whether it's CBT or DBT or polyvagal or EMDR or taking a guy out in the middle of the woods and letting him just rip, just let him scream it out, like just let it go. Talk therapy, chair therapy, just the gauntlet of things. That transformative piece is also trickled in there so that they have these experiences to look back on and go, wow, like not only am I doing some heavy lifting, but I'm feeling this massive relief, and it builds that muscle memory of like, I want more of that. I want more of this and less of that, right? Less of this path, and I want more of this. And it's so organic, You would think when clients graduate, they'd be like, hey man, how did you map this out for me to have this experience with God at this moment? Because I look back and I can see all these things lining up, and I'm like, yeah, man, like I'm not smart enough. But there's a God who has a plan, and he's pretty big and he's pretty rad. And we have that intention of trying to bring that to the table. And I think that's what's led to our success, right? Is just keeping him at the helm, clinical excellence, and bringing in people that are creative. There's so much evidence backed by what, someone like Dr. Jeffrey Hansen brings to the table and other therapists, that it's, who are we to not say, right? And I find that so different about us, because we've toured, I don't know, so many centers, so many facilities, and they always tell us too, they like, now that we're, been 5, 6 years, almost 7 years in, they're like, man, I didn't think you guys were going to make it. Like, you guys had no experience in treatment, none of you worked in treatment. This rad and awesome, and we get to be a part of it. And, we don't always need the answers to the how, but just the why. Why? Because it's rebuilding families. Like what else is that much more important, So yeah, it's been exciting. And that growth and where we're going and where we're headed. I remember the first time we moved buildings, and you could look back from our old building to the old building, and I was like, oh wow, like this really just happened. Like God just expanded us. God just brought this together. We had been moving for like 4 days straight and cleaning, just trying to get everything done. And I was sitting on the steps at our other place, and I'm, holy cow, this is much more than we ever imagined. And that was 4 years ago.
And I've seen this a lot in recovery, where you have someone who struggled with, let's say, alcohol, right?
Mm-hmm.
And substances. And they're fresh out of recovery, but they want to do something and make a difference. So they're driving that dopamine pathway that would have been abusing drugs and alcohol or whatever to something like this. Like you built a thing where you're literally firefighters for the soul, right? So you're a firefighter out there, hotshot, fighting forest fires, but now you're trying to rescue somebody and also disciple them in Christ. So is that the defining thing that's making you different than the other programs, that's making you so highly successful? Is the addition of Christ being the center point?
100%, because a lot of the therapies we do, for us to sit here and say, hey, we are so unique, no one does it like us, they don't, there's certain things that we do really well, and there's certain things people don't do like us. But, when it comes down to some of these clinical pieces and aspects, there's a lot of great therapists at different facilities, a lot of great therapists out there, We're just fortunate to have some of the best. But when you add that addition of Christ, when you look at the 12-step program and where it initially started, right? It was 3 steps, and it was Christian based. And then they opened it up because they didn't want to discriminate to people that maybe weren't having this experience with God. But it's still, half the steps are about finding your higher power. And so when you look at that spiritual experience, for us, we've just defined it to who we know who to be true, who's just made sense, that has shown up. And I read the Bible and I see it happen in my life, and I watch my children grow, and I watch other people's lives grow, and it just aligns with what people are searching for. And what's so cool, it's such an open template for the clients, right? It's not, when a lot of people think about a Christian program, they think of like a Bible boot camp, right? We get a wide range of people. We get people that work for the government, we get first responders, we get veterans, we get people all the way to the other side that have done 10, 15 years in prison. And what is the commonality? What is the commonality of those people? They're broken and they're hurt. And they have a hole that they're trying to fill with a substance, or a process addiction, gambling, pornography, whatever, like this massive combination. And we've tried to have this design feature of them coming into an encounter, but within the first 4 hours, we're like, this isn't it. This has to happen organically for them, and we see it every morning. The clients have a Bible study. That's them. That's not us telling them, hey, you got to do this. This is them doing it, right? They do an evening circle. They do a morning prayer. That's them, because they see the changes in their life. And so for us, I'm just trying to be an example. Like, hey, 4 + 4 is 8, and that math works. And the recovery math and spirituality math that I do works for me too. And that's keeping God first, right? My recovery and my family, and being a service to others. And that's never let me down. I've never been sitting there going, wow, that was a waste of time. Or, gosh, that wasn't a relief, right? Doesn't mean struggles weren't there, but trying to be that living example to them. They just see it. They just feel it. They just know it. We get clients, they've been through 5, 10, 15 treatment centers, and they come to us. Statistically, they should be dead. And they're at the end. And it's like, where do they go now? Well, you either give your life to death or you give it to God. That's it for some of them. And one of them is a staff member of ours. He's been with us for over 5 years. He's chasing me in recovery. That's how close we are. And that's how beautiful it is of like, we get to watch them grow. And here he is giving it back tenfold. And he'll
19 treatment centers he went to before he came to Holdfast.
19 of them.
And he came in, remember, and he said, okay, I'm going to be here for 90 days. Good, I have 89 days to prove that your God's not real.
Yeah.
And, I think it was day 40 that he ended up dropping on his knees, praying to God. And, now he's one of our director of client services and outreach, and just does a phenomenal job. And,
amazing.
Tribute to saving his life.
We provided that space to ask the questions that everyone's afraid to ask God. I think so many people can be turned away from God or Christianity because of what, the world may say about Christianity. But God, there's no question too big for him. There's no anger too loud, right? That can't be processed with him, that he won't provide answers or depth or reason behind. It's just, do we have the patience enough to listen? And he came in with every question you can think of. And instead of, well, you can't think that way, or it says this, and no, yeah, man, I've had the same question, dude. I struggled with Moses parting the Red Sea. I was like, was it high tide? Was it low tide? But I see God working in my life, and I look at the history, and I look at the science, and I look at, the Dead Sea Scrolls and all, and I'm like, there's no way that it didn't happen. There's absolutely, if he could save someone like me that shouldn't be here statistically, then I think that, these miracles, they're real. I could feel them. And as many of us can. And so that's the experience we're trying to share. Ultimately is a spiritual transformation, that their eyes are fixed upon God. Not because they have to, but because they want to, because they see the worth. And they've tried. They've tried so many other options. I've tried so many other options. And it was like, okay, well, maybe God does love me. Maybe he does have forgiveness. And maybe I can receive that. And the worst that can happen is it doesn't work. But for those who have sought and seeked, I haven't seen it not. And so that's that. Like you said, that's the difference. And then the cool part is, and the fortunate part is, it's not us. Right? It's just we're just a vessel. We're just present. This is just a body that the Holy Spirit gets to work through, gets to be passed down to someone who's 1 or 2 days sober or clean. And they feel that. And that's like something they haven't felt, some people, decades.
That's amazing. So Tim and Brendan, any advice for people who are struggling right now? Like, what would you tell them?
I think the first thing is to ask for help. I think there's so much shame and guilt for so many people that they think that they're a horrible person, or that they're so different than everybody else. And it's just having the courage to ask for help. And it does take a ton of courage to ask for help, right? To step out and admit that you have a problem. But if you think you have a problem, you probably have a problem, right? And you need to reach out and ask for help.
Yeah, that's such... In today's culture, we're doing a good job at changing it, but I think people are still afraid. And I think people, at least for myself, when I was in that situation, I didn't feel worth it. I felt like I had done enough bad things that this is just the way my life was going to be. That, karma had caught up, whatever you call it. And it was like, hey, man, you made these choices and now you get to lay in it, right? And this conception, I remember before I got sober, the symptoms of PTSD were pretty active. Like I wasn't sleeping. I was waking up, with nightmares and in sweats, and I couldn't even like eat red meat. There were certain things like I just couldn't even do, and I just became to accept that as my new normal. And I was like, well, we'll see how long I make it, right? And it's so far from true. Like I truly believe that no one is too far gone for God to reach. And we've seen it clinically, and it talks about it in the big book, even the doctor's opinion of like what this spiritual experience and peer-to-peer relationship can do for us. And it's powerful. And so for those that are out there that are struggling, for me, like, you're worth it. Like, you may not think it, but give it long enough of people loving on you and showing you value and how much you mean to this world and how much you can add, and let them tell you that worth until you can build that up yourself, because we've broken it down, we've minimalized, we've demoralized ourselves, we've done things that we said we'd never do before. I never thought I'd be a heroin addict. That wasn't the plan. The plan was to go off to college and be good and maybe be a pastor one day, and like that. And no one wakes up and is like, hey, I just want to ruin my life with drugs and alcohol today. And so that value, when we can't find it within ourselves, God has a value for us. And if you can't find that, then let someone who can speak light into you say it. And, that can be at a church, it could be at a treatment facility, that could be within a counselor, it can be within, a peer, the rooms of the anonymouses, right? There's so many out there that are just itching to like pass down this knowledge, this freedom that's been given that seemed like it was unachievable, right? And that's what I would say.
So cool. So I'm going to take this opportunity to bring on DJ next so that he can actually share his experiences of going through this program and his testimony. But thank you, gentlemen, for what you're doing and what you're doing in Prescott.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Andy.
you, brother.
You're welcome. So I had some time this morning with DJ at breakfast and got to really know him, and just an incredible man. Wonderful story. So, DJ, what was your life before Holdfast?
My life before Holdfast, just real quick, little back history. They had mentioned earlier in the podcast that I'd recently retired. I did 28 years in the fire service down in the valley. I was a captain. Had worked my way up into that position and enjoyed the job thoroughly, and I joined in 97, and then ended up doing 26 with one, and then totaled about 28 years in the service. And so
Yeah, thank you for your service. It's wonderful to
thank
have
you for your service. Yeah, absolutely. So
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, you're amazing. And Dr. Jeff, everybody that I've come in contact with up here in Prescott and Holdfast and AnchorPoint, and it's been such a blessing and a benefit. And then, as he talked about you, and this was taking place, I just don't say no to an opportunity to be involved in this portion of the recovery process, just because it's that true and dear to me, and like you hear in the rooms, how it saves lives. And this is the next level of kind of, saving us for me personally, from the addiction, and then allowing me to learn and get educated kind of back into the spiritual aspect of it that I had lost a long time ago. 2011, I was introduced to the program. I realized I was an alcoholic and an addict. And so I was first introduced to AA and the Big Book. I had understood the disease a little bit. But I remember I came from a faith-based family, so early on I had that privilege to learn about Christ and God and stuff like that. But I had lost track of that relationship as I went through life. But I remember picking up the big book and I went, "Oh, God's in there again." Like I was reintroduced at that time. And so kind of fast forward, I did the recovery, stuff like that, continued on with my career, was successful, and then found myself in a jam again in 2016, and things had gotten really bad. I'd built up so much trauma. I had trauma as a child. And then the addiction portion of it. So Dr. Jeff had educated me on this last go around in regards to, like I had the trifecta going on. So I had the, like most of us do have that childhood. And then I built up so much just in my line of work, like you hear about, like who protects the first responders, like who helps the first responders that help. And so Holdfast has been that anchor point for me, that true, the men and women that work there are truly saving lives. Not just in the first responder aspect of it, but there's definitely men, individuals that come through there in different walks of life, and to watch them transform it's just phenomenal.
And the rates of addiction is relatively higher in first responders and military members, for example. Those are always facing, frontline types of crises.
Right.
Or is that true?
That's extremely true. And so I had some tools in the toolbox to manage. And so as I went through my career, those tools weren't working anymore. And so I found myself back in, I would come off shift and experience some trauma, and I would start to drink, like on the way home, that type of thing. And that behavior just got worse because I did not know what to do with that kind of trauma. I didn't know where to go with it. Everything I'd kind of learned. And then back in the day when I got on, it was just be tough, pull up your bootstraps, go about your business. With us in the firefighter industry, and we had individuals in the truck so we could discuss the call, but it wasn't to the level where I've done a bunch of EMDR trauma. I had 8.5 years. I had a trauma therapist that worked with me really well in 2016 and worked on all the trauma I had. And then if stuff continued to pop up in my career, I could go address that with her and stuff like that. So that it does. It's more public now. The departments are doing better with health and wellness in regards to how do we help these individuals with substance abuse and then the trauma that they experience in life, because the suicide rates and the abuse and the divorce and stuff that comes along with that kind of career.
So how did Holdfast and also faith play a role in your recovery? And how is that different than, AA in the big book?
Mm-hmm. And so in 2016, when I was I ended up back in a facility, and they said they were faith-based. And my family had found, hey, this one says they're faith-based. And so I was like, that was going in, I had some hope because that was very important to me. I knew I needed to have that connection with God to truly save my life and get a handle on that. I needed to work on that relationship. And I got in there and I worked the program to the best of my ability and enjoyed that. But there truly wasn't a faith-based program like they had kind of sold. And so with this last go around, I did 7 days in detox. And then I ended up coming up to Holdfast in Prescott. I wasn't aware of the program. I know his story. We were very involved in that crisis that took place in Arizona with helping out Prescott and stuff like that. So I kind of had a little bit of a background, but I didn't understand what Holdfast really was about. And they said, hey, we're sending you somewhere with a faith-based place. And so I just remembered the other place. So I had hope, but didn't have a whole lot of weight in it in regards to. But the individual that picked me up, they had a BHT pick me up, and those are one of the guys that house manages us when we're in the facility. And I knew when I got in his vehicle and he drove me up from the valley that this particular individual had so much passion for God and love and Christ, like something clicked in me, and I was like, I had this relief, like, okay, this truly is a faith-based program. And so my hope just was immediately risen as I started this new journey and was fearful and scared and all the things that take place when you end up, at the edge again of addiction like that. And so it was early on, I had felt that from an individual, and then walking in the house that particular afternoon, And I've never been in any facility or around men to that type where God was talked about so much and they would break out in little Bible studies. I'm like, this is real. I mean, this is real, and it continued to grow. I'm coming up on 4 months, so I'm fresh out of the program. But that's how important it is to me because of how my faith is growing. Like, I was reconnected to God within a 24-hour period. They have these great staff and great programs, but not only do they take you to different meetings, they would allow us to go to church or Bible study, and they were always looking for something that was going to continue to allow the clients to build on that faith. And I was just, day to day, I was extremely just blown away on how that was taking place. And then how staff and Dr. Jeff, there would be individuals in there and they'd say, hey, we want more biblical stuff. Educate us, because I'm not very educated on the Bible. And so they would hear those suggestions and then change the curriculum to try and accommodate the men in the room. And so it was just outstanding, and they continue to adapt and grow in that area. And then, so like I said, some of the different opportunities, they allow the BHDs to go, hey, we've heard about this new meeting, or we've heard about this new Bible study, and they would allow us to go as clients. And I've watched men up here like get baptized and just their faith grow. And so guys would recommit themselves early on. We were allowed to go to one of the churches up here. I was watching individuals come in, like myself, within 24 hours. I'd pulled a sponsor and I'd rededicated my life to Christ. I'd done the all-call Heights Church down here that they allow us to go to. And so I would watch that on a daily basis as a new person would come in, and we could just see the Holy Spirit work in his life. And that gave me so much hope to see myself and then those individuals, because it changed the percentage in our odds on actually getting this and having long-term sobriety.
That's awesome. And what's the most challenging aspect that you've encountered during this recovery process?
You know, I was kind of looking over the questions you guys had sent me, and so I think in different phases for me, there was stuff that came up, and I thought at that time that was the most challenging portion of it, because as you get sober, like in 2 weeks, you're kind of here, and then in a month you're here, and then things would. So it wasn't one particular thing. At the time, it seemed like a big deal or a crisis. But it was like as things came up throughout the 90 days, I had these little teeny tests that came up, and it was, how do I handle them? And then if I couldn't personally do it, I reached out for help, whether it was men in the rooms or staff or someone at one of the facilities I went to or church, and they would help me navigate that. And so those crises were minimized, and then I had resources to act on them correctly compared to my old behavior. And then respond accordingly. So it wasn't just one thing, it's just a progression, because they're just trying to get you stable and then rebuild my faith or our faith, and then be able to have us interject back into the world and our families and start to recover some of the damage that I personally had done.
You know, in the past, I've talked about, I don't like to refer to addictions or addicts. I like to refer to them as go-getters. So the dopamine drive in the brain is a reward system that's very strong. And when we don't have the right tools, as you mentioned, when you faced a crisis and Holdfast gave you the appropriate tools to deal with it, it actually mitigated the crisis. However, it becomes a crisis when you use the wrong tools, such as drinking alcohol or drugs or process or behavioral addictions, right? And so if we go get the wrong things, that leads to that addictive behaviors. But when you go get the right things, you get a retired captain from the fire department, you know, for example. Yeah. So basically I said that for people who are out there struggling with addictions, and I know it's a big problem because we have industries that are flooding the market with pornography and with gambling and betting and video games and access to fentanyl and drugs and so forth. Addiction rates are off the chain.
Yeah.
And so don't be discouraged, you know, seek recovery.
Right.
So what would you say to someone who is struggling, who's a go-getter? What are the first steps to finding healing?
Well, obviously, I mean, I'm biased because of what they've offered and what I've experienced up here. And so the right recovery is the key. If you're truly looking for that faith-based organization that has that, this is the place to do that at. And so it's just as you move through recovery, you have to change the toolbox on the tools in there. And so the journey was to add the correct things, like you're talking about, in that toolbox. So when whatever that situation was, those resources, I got to fill that toolbox and continue to fill that toolbox as this journey continues on in sobriety. And so that's the difference from the old stuff. Or like you said, the dopamine, like I stopped drinking and using, but then those other addictions start to play a role in that and then can set you back, and they separate me from God. Like I don't have the cravings. I was truly removed from alcohol and drugs. And now it's that constant contact with my higher power to my best ability to move forward and then work on those other addictions that are there for most of us. They're just not the primary. And so when you go to different facilities, they teach you to stay sober and work the program, which is amazing. But I think they fall short in different arenas when it comes to the connection with the God of our understanding. For me, it's Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit and God. And so for me to be successful and live a productive, healthy life as a godly man and show my family the difference from the other places that were very beneficial. And then I think in timing, there's things that are just in life that are timing. And so you have those opportunities. And so here was another opportunity. Yeah, I'm disappointed because this is my third time in treatment. But what I've gained in such a short period of time, the hope has completely changed. And I lost joy a long time ago. Like I could find happiness and maybe for a period of time in a pill and I had tons of injuries from work or a bottle or an activity or going somewhere. But I didn't have I remember my wife asking me like, where's your happiness and joy? And I couldn't even understand the question because I didn't know what joy meant anymore. And I found joy up here again. Like truly joy in just the simplest things. And you hear, oh, look at the sunrise and sun. I was up here when it snowed twice. I haven't been around snow or driven in snowboard for years. And so like I could capture those things that were very simple, but yet like the value of joy has just changed. And I actually have joy throughout the day. And then watching what takes place in Holdfast and AnchorPoint and in the rooms has just been very, very beneficial for me. So hope and joy were what I really found this particular time, and just extremely grateful for that opportunity, and then to have the right people in my life as I move forward.
So DJ, autonomic regulation is so important.
Yeah.
And what have you found to be a very useful tool, especially for our viewership? Because right now we live in a, Jonathan Haidt wrote a book called The Anxious Generation. Okay. Literally because kids are growing up with cell phones and they are super anxious. They do not regulate their nervous system, autonomic nervous system very well.
Right.
So what tools have you found to be particularly helpful?
Right. And so I did learn a lot of this with my prior therapist and stuff. And so like for me, I lived in fight or flight for so long just due to the nature of my personality and then the line of work I was in. And so, I was always kind of floating around in this area, and I'll let the professionals describe, this chart more. And I had an understanding of it, but when I got to be a client with Dr. Jeff and he brought this out, it really just started to resonate and I started to understand it differently. And he pointed out some trauma from my childhood and where my parents were. And then transfer trauma, I'll let you guys explain that at some point. Some of that stuff was very beneficial that I was just not educated in recovery. I was educated in how the brain works and the heart works and stuff like that. Like it's just such a different approach from different centers. And so as Dr. Jeff presented this to me and would bring it out and educate the class on that, as you get a little more time sober, things start to work, in your brain better. And so for me, I was always kind of down this area. And then I would use, and then I would just hide and isolate. So I would go to this, but I could never find myself in that blue-green area. And so this time around, I was stuck over here all the time, or then I would be here. And so he helped me through our sessions to figure this out where I was, to help me with trauma from a child, and then help me with the addiction phase of it, and then help me with the trauma from work. And so he was able to help me figure out, how do I get back into this green and blue and regulate that. So I was always like this, my flap would be stuck wide open. So for me to close my flap, is what I called it, and my other therapist, I would use alcohol, right, to try and calm that brain down and settle whatever was going on to me. And that's obviously not a good tool. And so up here, I was given that opportunity to figure that out with the faith-based portion of it, and how God has designed our bodies and our brains and our minds and our souls to be able to regulate this stuff. And so now I can bounce into the red, but I don't stay there as long, or I don't get the road rage or the anger that would come, or I can move out of it shortly. I can realize those behaviors are acting, or want to pick up a drink because of something as, set me off. And so I can live in this, and it's just, I had not lived in this for years and years, and it's been so refreshing on top of everything else to be able to walk around in life. And I think that's where I can start to have that joy in the simpler things, because I've got my brain and my body and my heart rhythmias back down in where I needed to be. And he was so vital in that. And so the benefit of Holdfast and the clinicians was, my cortisol levels were so screwed up, and the chemicals in my body from being at that state for so long, and then using the substances, were so messed up for such a long period of time. And then being able to realize that stuff, and then have them educate me on that, and then the value of the educational piece. A lot of the stuff I couldn't understand, and I read his book, and I was like, oh, it was just phenomenal. And so I started to understand that better, and then I could find myself being able to regulate much better. But then it was like, okay, now I understand why I did some of the things I did, because of X, Y, and Z. That's what's different about Holdfast. Like, they have a different approach. They take such different tools to not only not cure us, but lead us in the right direction for recovery, and then provide us kind of the why behind some of that stuff. And so for me, like, I carry this around just as I share my story, or I talk to different individuals. And so, and some are familiar with it, and some not, but there's not a client that goes through there, and given the opportunity, they get to experience this, whether they grasp it or not. I just happen to, timing wise, and God allowed me to really grasp this. And then it helped with so much trauma from the past, and then understanding my career, and then now why I was back here. Why did I fall short? Where did I, relapse because of X, Y, and Z? Because I still had so much of this going on that I had worked on for years and years, and processed a lot of that trauma, but I was just left here, And so as I retired, and I wasn't getting that adrenaline and those calls that would elevate me, even though I walked around in here all the time, it didn't take me long to get there, because the call would come in, but I could never regulate again. And so this was just very beneficial. I just hold it dearly. I don't, like, he gave me a copy of it, and I just carry it around, and I bring it out and share it. So not that I have the educational piece of it, but I just have the understanding now, kind of how my brain and body work to a different level. So
DJ, thanks so much for sharing and being so honest.
Yeah, thank you.
Very powerful.
Yeah.
And God, I'm praying for you for your recovery and your recovery journey.
Yeah.
And you're on the right track, man.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for joining us today in Prescott, Arizona. And remember to like, share, and comment. And also hit the subscribe button so you get our future videos. Until next time, God bless you and have a wonderful day. And record. You can do it now.
Action.
And then the cool part is, and the fortunate part is, it's not us. Right? It's just we're just a vessel. We're just present. This is just a body that the Holy Spirit gets to work through and gets to talk. Because if you pull me and Tim aside 2 hours from now, we're like, Neanderthals talking, dude. Just farting and stuff, and but like in the reality of the world, God speaks through us and gives us this beauty that is beyond our brain, beyond anything I can unlock. That
So smile and just go bam. That's it.
Good job. You can go sit down. Good job.